Hey everybody, it's me, Shelly Halverson. I am the Director of Special Education in 504 for the district. For those of you that are new to us and don't know me, welcome to Salt Lake City School District. We have two trainings for you in special ed for Admin Institute, this one and another one called Special Education Updates. This one is about your responsibilities as an LEA in your building. And we'll just go through it together, and I've also included the PowerPoint in the Canvas course so that you can take a look at it later, or you can use it to take notes on. That is up to you. So here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and run us through this PowerPoint together. As you know, being an LEA for special ed is the best part of your job. It's something I'm super passionate about as the Director of Special Ed, so I am super grateful to you for your advocacy on behalf of individuals with disabilities, which is a category of individuals that kind of catches all categories. The disability knows no bounds when it comes to the variety of types of students that we serve. So I see it as a really important nexus point of intersectionality for a lot of children. Anyway, so this is me fumbling with here we go, with my PowerPoint. I got it. All right, so as an LEA in a building, you have two main responsibilities to make sure that we are compliant with IDA. One is child find. So it's our responsibility as a district to search out and find individuals with disabilities and make sure students receive services. So you usually do that through your Student Services Committee, and there's some stuff in the written agreement about the membership of the Student Services Committee and its purpose. So you can always refer there. The other responsibility that you have is to be an LEA for eligibility, IEP, and placement meetings that happen in your building. Some of you may have seen this before, but it's been a while since I shared it. So this is a little graphic that we came up for for administrators of understanding these two different roles. And we're going to talk about each one of them separately. But the Student Services Committee, you are the chair of that committee. You should have yourself and a special education teacher, typically a resource teacher, on that committee with you. Often the school counselor, a school psychologist. You can invite really whoever you feel like would benefit. If you have an interventionist, a speech person, if you're going to be talking about a student you have a communication concern about. Your ALS coordinator is important because they need to be able to speak to the progress of a student who is an ELL learner before we would even consider referring them for SPED. And sometimes we have gen ed teachers on that committee too. And the whole point of that committee is when a teacher is concerned, they sign up to come to that committee. They bring their concerns about the student, and possible special ed is only one facet of what can be talked about at Student Services. You can see here with our little graphic, there's a whole lot of options. The whole idea is to help teachers design interventions and plans for kids that may need them. So it could be a math plan, it could be reading intervention, it could be working with the counselor, maybe there's an attendance concern we want to work on with the family. So considering special ed is just one little piece of that. It's not the purpose of Student Services, but that is a place, the meeting where you would come to making a referral if you felt like that was something you needed to do. And then the other side of this chart is your other job, which means you are a required member of the IEP team. You're in charge of not in charge of, but you are, you're required for compliance, and your signature on that IEP guarantees the provision of those services. So it is your responsibility then to make sure that everything we agree to on an IEP happens, including accommodations in whatever setting the child happens to be in that are required for that student. So that becomes a really important role. And I've added a bullet because really the LEA in the meeting is the bridge between the family and the educational providers in the building. And so you can really set the tone for that to be a positive relationship. And you can really, your job is basically to kind of make sure parents are heard and participate as much as possible in those meetings. It also helps you kind of understand what you should be seeing when you go into your special ed classrooms as the supervisor of your special ed teachers. You kind of know what to look for because you've sat in the meetings and you know what they've agreed to do for different students. And then it also allows you to have firsthand knowledge of the needs of the kids in your building. And you can ask really good questions and make sure that we cover all of the bases when the teachers are writing plans and making accommodations. So a couple things that I want to talk to you about. Well, I don't want to talk to you about them, but I am going to talk to you about them, is referral and COVID. It's going to be like sort of speechless at the moment about this whole thing. So let's talk about it for just a minute. Obviously, we're going to come back in the fall with a whole bunch of kids who have big holes in their education because of COVID slide and because of lack of access and because of a million reasons. So I don't have all hammered out perfect guidance for you about special education referral during this time. But what I will say is that a deficit, an academic deficit that has been created because of school dismissal or because of lack of access or because of lack of instruction because the student chose to not participate, none of those things are a disability. So especially in the category of SLD, we need to be super duper cautious about any sort of referral that happens on data that we have from this school year. I can see that there would be, obviously it all depends, right? So there could be students that we have seen over time, pre-school dismissal and COVID, that have been struggling that we may determine this year need a referral for special ed, but we just need to be super careful that we are not identifying someone as having a disability when it's a reaction to what has happened because of the pandemic. So just be super careful about that. I'm going to be pretty stingy about that, and we'll be kind of highly involved in those things because all kids will have some sort of COVID slide, most likely. And until we are able to return to a new normal, and that we are able to provide instruction to kids in the format they're used to in person and do that for everyone, we kind of will have no idea how kids compare to their peers in different things. And so we're just going to need to be super careful about that. So just be aware of that when you are running student services meetings, that if a teacher gets a student for the first time this year and they're coming in October to say, well, how far they are behind and they think they need to be tested. No, not unless we have some sort of more objective information about that student, whether it's in the parent interview when we learn that there's a medical issue or something that happened that would create that type of scenario. We just have to be so careful about making that determination just based on academic data that we have in school right now. So that's my little message about referral and COVID times. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Typically, see now, why do I stop sharing and now it won't advance my PowerPoint, you guys? What's that about? That's really annoying. Hold the phone. Okay. Oh, now it's going crazy, but you're not seeing it because I'm not sharing it. Okay, well, we're going to fix that now. Sorry, this has already happened to me once. This is not the first recording of this meeting. I think I might just do it this way because it's going to be a little bit easier. But anyway, I also wanted to let you know that I have been working on my own advocacy for students of color, in particular our Black students. and we've all talked about in the spring about our issue of being identified for disproportionality as a school district for Black students and being qualified under emotional disturbance. And I've shared with you the data around that and how many of them are in self-contained placements and access those as initial placements. There's just a whole bunch of concern, which of course, considering where we're at as a country and the different things that have happened, I find it imperative for me to kind of make sure that a process that we already know over identifies students of color as having disabilities, that we put a few more safeguards in place. So, you know, we provided for you a couple of years ago the MIT form, which we use to guide student services committees, and we encourage people to fill one out on every student that comes, just to kind of help make sure you're gathering the right types of data. But we're taking a second look at that now. And I've had some help from the EESS department directors and Dr. Buendia and Dr. Gutierrez about looking at just the language that we're using and how we talk about deficit and how we talk about, you know, how we look at deficit and what that even means. And so it's complicated, right? It's a lot to unpack. So we are working on reworking the MINT form. So all I really want to say right now in reference to this is it's time for us to unpack for ourselves the way we see deficit and the way we see children, especially our children of color who are participating in a system that has a lot of bias in it. And nowhere is that really more apparent than in special ed. And so I've been grappling myself with just how I feel about all of that and being complicit in that, because I have been. So that's something I'm working on. But I want you to really pay attention to who's coming to student services, and not just the students, but also your teachers, and which teachers you feel like are working to, I love how Berenice talks about it, decolonize their minds, and making sure that we are, if a student has a teacher that is unwilling to do that or hasn't done that, or I don't know, we just need to be really careful about who we are referring and why. And that student-teacher relationship is probably the most important indicator of whether or not those practices are happening. So I just would caution you to look at the profile, I guess, of students that are coming to student services, and we're working on helping you with that, but it's just not quite ready yet. So I'm just challenging you to pay close attention to who those referrals are happening to, and we just need to stop them from happening if students are not really getting what they need because of those different biases and things like that. Oh, got emotional. So anyway, that's my concern about that. Look at, I made it work. Okay, so those are two things to think about when it comes to student services and referrals this year. It's complicated, but it's more complicated than ever, but we love a challenge. So we're gonna take it on, and we're going to do things the right way for our students. Okay, so our next, what's happening? Oh no, look what I did. Okay, anyway, I got it. Sorry guys. The next is LEA being an LEA in a meeting. So these are a couple of reminders that I wanted to share with you. This is your meeting. When you're in an IEP meeting, you're the leader. So you set the tone. You're the bridge between families and school. The LEA needs to start the meeting, needs to explain the purpose of the meeting, needs to welcome everyone to the meeting, make sure the introductions happen before you hand it over to teachers. You need to stay for the entire meeting. And I know that there are exceptions to that rule, you know, if something is happening in the building that you have to attend to, but the law says you need to be there the whole time. So that should be the exception and rather than the rule. I often see the LEAs in meetings act as the note taker, which just is really a nice way for you to stay engaged in the meeting. Some of these meetings that we're in are really long. And so it's nice. Plus then it gives you the opportunity to clarify what might be happening in the meeting. And then I'm counting on you to check in with parents throughout the meeting, make sure that their questions are being answered, asking them if they would like to change something or add anything at various points, even if it starts to feel redundant, that's okay. We need to keep checking with them. So let's talk for a minute about meetings during the COVID times. That's what we call it in our department, the COVID times. And so I love this meme. Oh my gosh, these Zoom meetings are hard sometimes, for sure. So let's talk about this for just a minute. I'm going to stop sharing and we'll see if I can ever make it work again. I don't know if I can. I need an accommodation. Okay. IEP meetings, as you know, can be conducted on the phone. They can be conducted in person if you can do it safely and people want to come in to do that. And they can be conducted this way on Zoom. A couple of things about the virtual meetings that I want you to think about is parent participation is vital. This is something we recently had a stumble with and have dealt with a complaint about. Parents not feeling like they're heard or that their participation is considered or valued. Anyway, their input is considered. So it's more vital than ever before that teachers are having conversations with parents before the actual meeting, if possible, whenever possible, about what the parent is worried about. What kinds of services and goals do they feel like their children need? Is there something that's happening in the home that we need to know about? Sending drafts home is more important than ever, and they have to say draft on the document because that's another problem that we'll talk about in the other training that you're going to hear, and a little bit today in this one. But another problem that we were seeing though in the spring that we got a lot of feedback on from some families is we still need to be able to read the virtual room. So if you notice that a parent is trying to parent their kids and attend this meeting and it starts to get very long, their ability to comprehend what we're sharing with them is going to go down. And that's also really hard on the phone. So we need to, if we have prepped the parent in advance for what is in the document, then there is no need to read it verbatim, word for word to them. What we should be doing is kind of summarizing the present levels and then ask if they need further clarification on any of that. And then we can talk about the goals and the pieces. You know, this is what this part says. This is what this part says. Do you have any questions about that? And move to the next part so that we can get really good participation. There was something else I wanted to say about that. See if I can find it. One thing that we found is that we were doing a lot of phone IEPs for our families that are ELLs, which is ridiculously difficult to do. So if it is possible to bring people in safely in person, we were concerned in a few situations that parents really understood what they were agreeing to because it was happening on the phone and we could hear all this noise in the background and then the interpreter's trying to talk so it takes twice as long and all those kinds of things. If it is possible to hold a meeting safely in person in those situations, you might want to consider doing that. Let's see. Okay, so that's all about that. So hold on. let's do this and see if I can get it to work. This is what happens when I go to share again, then I can't get it to move. Why is that? No one's answering me because you can't. Hold on, here we go. Again. Let's do this one until I can figure it out. Okay, so that's meetings during the COVID times. Oh, look at that. No? Yes! I'm getting better as I go. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is, oh shoot, is IEPs and COVID impact. So something that we need to consider this fall when we return is that an IEP needs to reflect the child's needs based on their current circumstances. So everyone's current circumstances are upside down right now. So we need to determine whether or not we need to make changes to an IEP in light of those circumstances. Are there additional services, goals, accommodations, or modifications that are required because of the impact of COVID for a student? So ask yourself some questions, have your teams ask some questions. Has the general curriculum changed? The curriculum hasn't changed, but the delivery has completely changed. So have the needs of the student changed? And the answer is highly likely their needs have changed. And if the answer is yes, then we need to realign the IEP and make sure that we've got the right accommodations in place. There might be some additional accommodations in the online environment that we need to make for a student and different things like that, because the whole point of an IEP is to provide specialized instruction, related services, and accommodations to allow students to participate in and make progress in the general education curriculum. So what students need in order to access that curriculum is likely vastly different now. So that is a conversation that teams need to be having as we move forward. And it might even mean, which makes me kind of, gives me heartburn, but it might even mean that it changes as the year goes on. So as we start in online and bringing some kids in for some services in the fall, if we are able to move to in-person or hybrid, in a hybrid model, that might change then what those accommodations need to be. And then if we end up back all together, it might mean that we need to look at it again. But we're just gonna have to be really fluid and be okay with that. Okay, so this is the biggie for us this year, is parent participation. So I'm showing you these memes, and while some of them are funny, they're not really funny because they reflect how a lot of parents feel about participating in IEP meetings because of different experiences that they have had with school staff. And I'm not saying that all of our experiences are positive either. I'm just saying that this is something that I'm pretty concerned about. Parent participation is a really big deal. So let's look for just a second. This is what the law says about it. Parents of a student with a disability have to be afforded the opportunity to participate in meetings about evaluation, identification, placement, and the provision of FAPE to their student. So they have to provide notice. We have to provide written prior notice that those meetings are going to take place. And as it says in this slide, they have to be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time and place. And we can't make decisions without them, and we can't make decisions before we talk to them. Part of the issue that we're dealing with from this complaint is predetermination, that the school, it was obvious to the parent and then the person who investigated the complaint that the school had made decisions before they talked to her, which is problematic. So we need to be really careful about that. When you're sitting in a meeting, because you are the bridge and you set the tone for your meetings, we need to consider. The magic word is consider. I don't care if they ask for a car as an accommodation on their IEP. Your response is going to be like, well, let's consider that. Let's look at it as a team. And then the next step, if they were to ask for such a ridiculous accommodation, would be to ask a lot of questions about, try to get to the root concern as to why they are asking for what they're asking for. So a car is a bad example because we haven't had that happen yet, but there's still time. We'll see. But like the one-on-one assistant request, when a parent makes a request for a one-on-one assistant, then I often ask them to tell me about why and what would that person be doing and blah, 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 blah. So I can get a list of why they feel like somebody needs to be with their child all the time. And then typically we can help them see that we can do those things without that. And if we're able to do it without that, that's what we are going to do because it's in the child's best interest. So that is totally fine. So just make sure that you are considering and you're kind of digging into why they're asking for what they're asking for, because sometimes sometimes parents think that's what they want, but it's not really what they want, if you catch my drift. We just have to figure out what that is. Don't make decisions before you meet with parents, period. Do you want to have a pre-meeting and talk about what you think might come up? Absolutely. Do not sit as a team and say, we're not going to agree to this. We're not going to agree to this, because we need to go into those meetings with like a skeleton, a draft of what we think would work, but we need to be open to any and all possibilities. Make sure that the documents that get sent home before the meeting say draft. I've seen it a couple of times during COVID where people were sending home documents that said final, and the email says something like, here is a copy of the IEP. So that can't happen. And I'll be talking to teachers about it. It needs to say draft, or in the email in which you're sending it, it needs to say, I'm attaching a draft of the possible IEP document. Remember, this document is fluid. We can change it at any time. You know, these are just jumping off points, like language like that, so that parents are sure that they know that this is not the end product. This is just a jumping off point. It's a really good idea to invite Amy Wyrick from the Utah Parent Center. We usually don't invite her to the meetings, but what we will do is I will call Amy and say, will you call this family and see if you can be of service to them? And then if the family wants to bring her, then they do that. But that's a really good way to go about it. And then another good new thing that I am trying out, and it's gone swimmingly, is to contact the parent after the meeting is over and ask them if they have any questions about what happened at the meeting. Do they need anything explained to them again? Because just imagine, some of you have been on the other side of that table, but if you know nothing and you're sitting at the IEP table, especially the first time, and it's an eligibility meeting and an IEP at the same time, that is a freaking tsunami of information. So following up with them after and finding out if there's anything that they need. And these are all tips I'm going to give teachers too, but it goes a really long way, especially in certain cases, if you guys are involved in checking in on any of those things. And now I've done the wrong thing again. I love Michael Scott. He's like the worst leader ever, but I love him anyway. I don't know if you guys realize just how important you are and how important your role is in this process for our families and for your students. This is a really important moment of advocacy for all of us. And so I really appreciate what you do for your students with disabilities. And I've said this before and I'll say it forever until my career is over. Our students with disabilities are our most at-risk group. They are the gap for them is the biggest, both access and achievement. And so if you can wrap around your students with disabilities and bring them into the community and make sure they are fully included in everything, and make sure that they are getting everything that they need. If we brought their achievement up as a district, the whole district's achievement would go up, because I can almost guarantee that they are the lowest performing group in almost every school. So what you do for them in all areas is super important. What you do for them by way of advocacy and student services and in IEP meetings is incredibly important. So I just want you to know that. And thank you for coming to my, it's not a TED Talk, but it could be, to my TED Talk about your LEA responsibilities. You will be hearing next week from your consultant. We've had to make some adjustments in those assignments, because we always have to make adjustments in those assignments. So you may have a different consultant this year than you had last year. And they'll be, they're back on contract on Monday. So you'll hear from them soon. And I appreciate you paying attention. And you can call me at any time or email me at any time. I would much rather answer questions than have to help you dig yourself out of something later. So let's be proactive. All right, hang in there, you guys. Bye.